On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks go on the road for the first time in the preseason, and they fall just short of staying undefeated in exhibition action. But there's plenty to get to on today's podcast, and we'll have a full breakdown of the game and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1567 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday here in mid-October. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day. And please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, and we're also on YouTube on the video side. And today's show will be focused on what became a narrow loss for the Hawks in Indiana, their first road game in the exhibition schedule. They're now 3-1 after winning the first three at home and losing this one on the road. It was definitely an up-and-down game. The Hawks had a ghastly, and I mean ghastly, second quarter of this contest before kind of clawing back with mostly the reserves in the second half. But it was their fourth game in 7 days. They were playing without, in my mind, the top three guys on the roster, definitely the top two in Trae and Dejounte. And it looked like it in the first half in a lot of ways. It was pretty ugly. They were down by as many as 29 points at one point in this contest. They did claw back, to their credit, played better after halftime, and showed some positive signs. But that's kind of the gist of things on this Monday evening. We'll dive in now from there. Pregame is a bit of an adventure, actually, when it comes to information about this one. Because it's the preseason, no one from the Atlanta media actually traveled to Indianapolis at all. That included the Bally Sports Southeast crew. I got a lot of questions about why it was the Pacers broadcast. Basically, Bally, of course, owns both of those stations, and because it's preseason game, they don't really travel for all that. So there was essentially no one on the Hawks beat of sorts to ask Quin Snyder about player availability in pregame. And with that, plus all the preseason stuff with no injury reports, we were all flying totally blind on who would play. I did report early in the day on Monday that everybody traveled to Indiana, which definitely did happen, but that doesn't mean they're going to play. And basically at the half-hour mark before tip-off, the league actually makes teams submit their starting lineups. So we finally got some information there. And the Hawks ended up starting Kobe Buffkin, Bogdan Bogdanovic, DeAndre Hunter making his debut for the preseason, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu, which basically signaled to everyone that Trae Young, Dejounte Murray, and Clint Capella were going to be out for this game, and they were. They were all in street clothes. No surprise there, obviously, that Trae and Dejounte would get a night off. I never thought they were going to play all five. So honestly, I was kind of expecting them to sit one of the home games at some point. They didn't do that. So this is kind of the one to circle again. Fourth game in 7 days, first road trip, all of that stuff. And the Capella obviously is well established. Doesn't really need reps at this point in time. Older guy, etc. But again, the real headliner of the pregame action was that DeAndre Hunter returned in this game. If you missed it at all last week, or basically Hunter's not played to this point in the first preseason games, it was revealed by Quin Snyder that he actually has what Snyder described as a mild bone bruise in his right knee. He told me after a follow-up question that it was not an issue. He insisted that after a question by me, but with previous knee issues that Hunter has had, the antenna was up a little bit when you're talking about a knee that actually cost him like more than half of a season a couple of years ago, etc. But then Bob Rathman, friend of the podcast, shared on the Bally broadcast on Saturday that Hunter told him that he was good to go, and Hunter ended up playing tonight and honestly looked pretty good physically. So that's probably, I'm not going to say there's zero concern, but certainly a lot of the fears were assuaged there when it comes to Hunter and his knee at this point in time. We'll come back to how this game unfolded, who played more minutes, etc. But big picture in this one, the offense was pretty good, especially after halftime. First half offense, not quite as slick, I would say. They shot the ball pretty decently, 48% from the floor. They were 12-26 from three, and they got 27 free throw attempts in this game. The second half was much better. They actually made 9 of 14 3-pointers. I will say, not enough volume. It was better as the game went along, but I think like late in the first half, they had 9 3-point attempts, just not enough there. I think Quin probably preached that at halftime, if I had to guess. Also, the Hawks had 20 assists and 17 turnovers. That's a bad ratio in a lot of ways. They did well on the glass, even without Clint in this game. They were pretty aggressive going to the glass in this one. And by the end, they had a 115 offensive rating. That's going to get you wins a lot of times. But at the same time, it was not the best effort in the world from the offense all the way across, although it was better, as noted before. Defensively, I'm going to attribute this point to my friend and regular podcast guest on this show, Glenn Willis, who pointed this out on Twitter. But the Hawks Also were playing kind of their normal, at least normal for this year so far, aggressive scheme. And that kind of played right into what Indiana was doing a lot of the time. And he speculated, I actually agree with this, that the Hawks might have tweaked that if the game actually mattered and there was more game planning. Snyder's been asked a couple times this year about like game planning and preseason stuff, and basically he's brushed that off as a lot of teams would. Like, you're not really running game plans in the same way that you do during the 82 game season. So you're kind of just running your own stuff, working on what you want to do. And I think in the first half in particular, it was pretty apparent that the Hawks were going to do what they're going to do. Results be damned in a lot of ways. And the Pacers got up a ton of threes, made a lot of threes, and defensively it was really, really rough in terms of the performance overall before halftime. It was better after halftime, and they ended up with a 118 defensive rating, which actually is not good, but it was like well into the 130s in the first half. So that kind of tells you how rough it was at times before halftime. The Pacers did, though, attempt 49 3-pointers in this game. And it's not all about 3-point attempts, but when your opponent takes almost double the shots from three as you, that's usually not a good process thing in the NBA. You do not want to allow that many attempts to a team that has some shooters like Indiana does with Buddy Hield, Tyrese Halliburton, etc. Ben Mathurin. Indiana also ran kind of down their throats a little bit this game with 22 fast break points. That is a number that you don't love as well. There were some real transition breakdowns from the Hawks defensively in the first half of this contest. But on the whole, I try to trust this during the game, especially for some frustrated fans that were kind of letting it boil over. Look, this is a preseason game. And again, I want to stress this. It was the fourth game in 7 days. They played every other day for 7 days and also traveled Saturday. It is what it is. Like, this is the one game, if you had to circle one on the calendar, that I would have said was probably going to be the punt game, either Saturday or today, and it ended up being today. So no real problems. And look, the Pacers played all their guys in this game. It was Halliburton, it was Mathurin, it was Miles Turner, Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin. All those guys played. Buddy Hield. All those guys played for Indiana, and the Hawks were without, again, for me, their top 3 players. So that's all that said. Like, it was not good in the first half. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But generally speaking, I don't worry too much about that. And they did come back and make it more respectable after halftime, which is a nice way to leave Indiana and then come back actually home before the Hawks head out for their final game on Friday in Philadelphia. All right. We'll have more on the game flow in this one. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. You should never actually worry about buying your tickets to a big event, and with Gametime, you actually never have to worry. With Gametime, they have last-minute deals on tickets for football or basketball or baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. It's really easy to navigate to find all the tickets you're looking for and buy them as well for any event in your area. They have zone deals. You actually pick the section that you're looking for, and you have to pick the tickets for you for an average savings of 18%. And with Gametime, you can see the views from all the seats actually in the venue that you're looking for, and that actually helps you know when it comes to what to expect when you arrive at that venue. They have all-in pricing, so you know your total up front without any of the hidden fees. And you also have peace of mind with Gametime, and the Gametime guarantee means you actually always get the best price anywhere. If you find tickets in the same section in the same row for less, you'll be credited 110% of the difference with Gametime. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime right now. Download the app right now in your app store. It's Gametime. Create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we'll dive in now to the game flow as it was in this one. And in the first quarter, DeAndre Hunter, again making his debut this season, got to the line right away. And that was encouraging to see. It's never been a strength of his attacking the rim, but I thought he was pretty aggressive. He looked good physically, and he was playing with more force than usual, which I definitely think is an encouraging sign. A nice pass from Kobe Buffkin starting at point guard in this game. And then Hunter got there again, later challenging Miles Turner. Kind of a friendly foul call to send him to the line, but still, I like what I saw, generally speaking. Buffkin kind of struggled a little bit in this one. He actually got a 3-pointer blocked that led to a run-out dunk for Houston. I actually saw a clinic video this week about Quin Snyder preaching that only 1% of 3-point attempts get blocked in the NBA, and he sort of encourages his players to just shoot them and not worry about getting blocked. I had to have that pop in my mind when that was blocked by Buffkin in the first few minutes. Kind of just funny. One of those things. They ran a gorgeous action out of a timeout that had Bogey attracting all the attention off of a curl, punctuated that with a lob from Buffkin to Jalen Johnson for a pretty dunk. That was a nice little play coming out of the break. Rotationally, it was AJ Griffin off the bench for Bogey as the first sub, then Sadiq Bey for DeAndre Hunter at the 3. They had Bruno Fernando and Trent Forrest playing as the top 9 guys, and they actually had Patty Mills as sort of a 10th later on in the first half. But again, down 3 guys, so not a huge surprise. They went a little bit deeper, generally speaking. The ball movement was pretty good early on. Nice passes by Jalen Johnson, I thought. Griffin had a nice bucket under control. We kind of worked to a spot methodically, got position, and then shot it off the glass pretty easily, honestly. There was a funny sequence in the first quarter where there was actually back-to-back challenges, which doesn't really happen ever in the first quarter, but it happened with this one. Snyder challenged one first, then Rick Carlisle answered that about a minute or two later. Kind of funny. Defensively, though, it was pretty shaky. 15 three-point attempts allowed, 9 assists allowed in the first quarter. Offensively, the Hawks did a pretty good job in the first quarter, but the second quarter was really, really rough. We'll talk about that right now. Indiana scored 11 points in the first 2 minutes of the second quarter. They were creating a bunch of open looks. They were scoring about 1.4 points per trip in the first 14 minutes of this game. Quin was visibly frustrated after another breakdown and an easy bucket, called timeout. And in my mind, the Hawks were just not taking anything away. What you can't do in the NBA is allow everything. If you're going to be even a bad defense, takes away something, generally speaking, whether it's 3-point attempts or walling off the rim or create turnovers, whatever, the Hawks were not taking anything away in the first half. I thought Bufkin really was struggling pretty badly, as was Griffin in particular. The deficit that just kept growing with every breakdown. Indiana also played very well, I thought. But staggeringly, it was a 32-8 run from the Pacers to end the half. It was 41-38, and then it was 32-8 after that to go down by a million at halftime. It was a 43-15 quarter for Indiana. In that second quarter, the Hawks were 6-20 from the floor with 9 turnovers and 10 fouls. Yikes. Indiana was 14-22 from the floor. They had 7 threes, they had 13 assists, and they had 2 turnovers in the quarter. So it does not get any more lopsided than that quarter was, 43-15. And better after that, but still. I don't know if it was a plan or not, but everybody stayed in the game after that. Nobody came out of the game at halftime. Hunter took a charge early on in the third quarter. That was a nice thing to see. Also took a pull-up 3 that he made. That's a shot that I like a lot more than the usual pull-up 18-footer that he likes to take. That's good to see. I thought Buchan was better in the second half. A couple of nice jump shots in a row. One off the dribble. One was a catch and shoot on the right wing. Indiana was still getting good looks for the most part, but the bench unit came alive. A 13-3 run by Atlanta to kind of get back within the game a little bit. Saddiq Bey was really good in the second half. The Hawks actually scored 28 points in the first 9 minutes after halftime. So they were flying around a little bit, taking more threes, making more threes, etc. AJ was better, much more assertive, I thought. And the Hawks scored 35 points in the third quarter to get back within striking distance. They didn't go as deep into the bench as early as they had been. I don't know if it was because they were trying to come back or if that was the plan all along, but only 11 guys played in the first 3.5 quarters. Wes Matthews was the only one that came in the third quarter. By the way, Saddiq Bey had 21 points and 10 rebounds in his first 19 minutes. That's a pretty ridiculous stat line, especially off the bench. The Hawks had the one big run was 29-10, extended, going down from 26 down to 7. AJ scored 5 in a row to kind of cap off that little push. They finally went a little bit deeper near the end of the fourth quarter with Mo Gay and Garrison Matthews and then Seth Lundy for about the last 5 minutes. The only guy, unfortunately for him, that did not play was Miles Norris. That was the first time actually in the entire preseason where someone that was healthy and available and in uniform did not play. So I think we already knew who the 18th guy was out of 18. It's Miles Norris. We kind of already knew that, and even more so now, I would say. But it got a little bit tight late, I will say. The Hawks kept trying to threaten to make the comeback. I thought Bruno struggled for the most part in this game, but he actually found Trent Forrest on a back cut for a layup to get within 4 with 1:20 to go. And then it was trading points. And then I think probably appropriately, Bruno got called for a flagrant foul with an interminable review. Just took forever. There were so many stoppages in this game. This is a game that started at 7 o'clock Eastern and went to like 9:40, just like a ridiculously long game. So many reviews and stoppages and challenges and all that stuff. But the Hawks were in it, just not all the way back in it. They never got within, I think, anything closer than 4, which is actually the final score at 116 to 112. So all that said, there was a lot happening here. Not to make it as clean as this, but the first half was, and really, actually, the Hawks won the first quarter, as funny as that is, and then won the third and the fourth. It's hard to lose in the NBA when you win 3 out of the 4 quarters, which the Hawks did in this game. But when the second quarter is 43-15, it's a little bit easier to see. But I think, again, on the whole, you can't remove that second quarter from existence, but I think in general, the rest of the game was pretty solid. I will say, as we'll talk about more in a second with the individual player stuff, a couple of guys did struggle. I thought Patty Mills was kind of a no-show in 5 minutes. Bufkin in the first half, AJ in the first half. Bruno was up and down, to be sure. So, no one was perfect. I mean, I think Hunter was pretty good, honestly. Griffin and Bey. Griffin second half, I should say, and then Bey overall, and then Johnson played pretty well as well. But, it is what it is. And a 4-point loss that we'll have more on in a second when it comes to the individual players and all this stuff on today's podcast. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is sponsored by Betterhelp. For a long time in my adult life, I was desperately unable to sleep. Even when I was really knowing that I really badly needed to. And for whatever reason, my brain got in the way with stray thoughts and it actually drove me crazy. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of working against yourself. Therapy with BetterHelp is great for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries in your life. It also happens to help you become the best version of yourself if you don't need to have experienced major trauma in order to benefit from therapy with BetterHelp. If you've ever thought in your life to potentially start therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll be matched up with the licensed therapist that you're looking for. And from there, you can switch therapists if you want to at any time for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, and the player evaluation portion of the podcast is here. We'll kind of fly through. Not a ton to talk about with Seth Lundy. He played 5 minutes. Was Norris DNP. Patty Mills was just kind of out of it. He had 1 steal, but was actually minus 16 in 5 minutes. Kind of funny. Not all his fault by any means. Garrison Matthews hit 2 threes in his 8 minutes. I thought he was pretty active and had a steal in there as well. Looked pretty good. Mo Gay played pretty well. I thought pretty active as well. Like flying around using his length. Had a block shot. Hit his only three-point attempt in 9 minutes. Wes Matthews played 10 minutes, 3 points, solid defense, hit 1 of 1 from 3. Trent Forrest played 24 minutes in this one, had 8 points, did turn the ball over 3 times, had 4 assists, 3 rebounds, was better in the second half like a lot of guys were, 4 or 5 from the floor. His defense is always good, so I've always liked Trent Forrest. That showed through in this game, although he was pretty shaky in his first stint, if I remember correctly. Saddiq Bey was awesome off the bench, 21 points, 10 rebounds, 2 steals in 20 minutes. Got to the line 5 times, hit 2 threes, was 5 of 7 on 2s. Just was very, very good. He looks great, honestly, in the preseason, looking physical. He's comfortable playing bully ball. Look, defensively, I still don't love what I see all the time from Bey, but like he's mixing it up. His problem, I think the Hawks probably know this more so now after maybe not a full year, but almost a year of having him in the fold, is like he's not good in space defensively. He's just slow-footed, but he is physical and he will try and he will expend energy and all that stuff. So if you can use him correctly, it sort of covers up a little bit of that stuff. And he's been really good so far in the 3 games that he's played in. 2 games he's played in. AJ Griffin, 15 points, most of which were after halftime. He was 3 of 6 on 2s, 3 of 4 on 3s, had 2 assists and a steal. He was very good after halftime. First half, not so much. But after that, he was quite good and showing all the flashes. I think Hawks fans are kind of panicking a little bit for AJ for whatever reason, but I'm not worried really at all. He looked good after halftime. Bruno Fernando, 8 points, did have 5 turnovers. That's way too many for a center in 22 minutes. 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He actually was +9, which is kind of funny because I think he kind of got them killed a little bit in the second quarter at one point. But he was on the floor for the second half run that the Hawks had. I thought he was not particularly good, honestly, but there you go. To the starters, Kobe Buffkin, rough first half, better after halftime, had 8 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. He was 2 of 8 on 2s and 1 of 3 on 3s. Not efficient at all. I do like that the Hawks are giving him reps as the point guard. I do think, at least I wonder, if something were to happen to Trae or DJ, I think they might go to Patty Mills or maybe even Trent Forrest ahead of Buffkin if I had to win a game today. But there is something to be said for your first round pick in particular, getting some developmental time. There's value to that. I'm not saying you play him at the expense of winning games, but I think along the way, you got to make sure he plays to develop him. And he's not great right now by any means, but he's better in the better second half for sure. Bogey had 9 points on 10 shots, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. He was a little bit creaky in the first half, better in the second stint that he had after halftime. Jalen Johnson had a much less impressive stat game than he did the other day. 4 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Offensively, a little bit more clunky. Like the first game, he was a little bit clunky in the half court in particular. The second 2 games, he was very good, got people very excited for good reason. And then today was kind of back to where they were in the first game, where he's not really sure what to do sometimes as a scorer in the half court, which is okay. But it's just a reminder to some people to calm down a little bit about Jalen. He's got some places to improve on for sure. The passing still played up in a big way. And really it's more about like what to do as a scorer. But defensively, he's certainly showing the flash that you want to see from him. I thought he was fine, and generally speaking, even if it wasn't blowing everybody away in this one like he was in the previous 2 games. Okongwu, 11 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks in 26 minutes. Looked pretty good. Did miss all 3 of his 3s, but took 3, and I like that. Still take 2 or 3 game. That's fine with me. And then DeAndre Hunter, 16 points, 3 rebounds. He was minus 22, but basically all the stars were bad in that particular category. But he was 4 of 9 from the floor, 1 of 3 from 3, but crucially 7 of 9 from the free throw line. And I thought Hunter was good defensively. He was active. He looked healthy. He looked springy. And the Hawks need that from him for sure. I wrote about this over the weekend at my Patreon. It's patreon.com/BTRowland about how much I want to see, just for information purposes, the Hunter-Johnson forward duo. The short version of what I wrote basically is that last year, DeAndre and Jalen did not play at all. I shouldn't say at all. Did not play very much. They were outside the top 40 duos that the Hawks used. They played just over 100 minutes the entire season together. And the results were very bad. And that's in that very small sample size. But for people that I know want Jalen Johnson to start at the 4, I still think right now the front runner by a lot to start at the 3 is DeAndre Hunter. So if that's going to be the case, if the Hawks want to consider and maybe even start Jalen at the 4, they're going to need to play those guys together some. And the results there have been bad. Even tonight, they weren't good on the plus-minus stuff playing together. I think the question really is on offense, because defensively, as I wrote in that column as well, defensively, that's their best pairing. I mean, DeAndre Hunter and Jalen Johnson are their 2 best defensive forwards. Maybe Wes Matthews would get in there too, but he's obviously limited at his age to playing not starter minutes. So anyway, defensively, that's probably their highest ceiling group. Offensively is the question. Can they get away with Hunter, Johnson, and Capella on offense? Even with Trae and Dejounte, not a ton of spacing there, not a ton. I mean, obviously some more passing with Jalen, but DeAndre and Clint are not great passers. All those things, I'm not saying they can't do it, but I'm just asking the question. And it was good to see those guys play together a little bit today. Defensively, it looked pretty good at times. It was the 2 of them did. As a team, not so much. But anyway, more to come on that, but that's a question that I would like to have answered. And we probably won't know the full answer until after the season actually gets going, but something to keep an eye on in advance of Friday and of course, in advance of the opener next Wednesday. All right, that's all the players and all we have in terms of the meat of the game in this one. I do have one bit of quick nerd sidebar. So even with no one from Atlanta at the game today, the Hawks shared the pregame audio from Quin Snyder with some of the media, and it actually went in an interesting direction when it comes to basketball nerddom. When a member of the Pacers press corps asked about Ronald Norred. Ronald Norred is on the Hawks staff under Quin Snyder. He was previously in Indiana, and it actually went into his role and more in a big picture sense, how Snyder believes in sort of the roles for assistant coaches and how he actually doesn't use offensive and defensive coordinators like some teams do. So it's 2.5 minutes of audio. I'm not going to play for you now, but it's interesting for the diehards. If you don't love it, that's fine. You can go ahead and sign off. Most of the podcast is over at this point in time. But here it is with Snyder and questions included, and we'll come back with more after you listen to it.
Can you kind of define what role Ron has for your team and how he's already perhaps made an impact?
Well, he's definitely made an impact, and a really positive one. I think his role is substantial. You know, he's doing advanced scouts, his responsibility for game preparation. You know, he's on the player development front. There's a couple, real key guys that he's working with. We don't kind of follow the coordinator model as much. And I feel like guys getting both sides of the ball when they have scouts. Game management. A little bit of everything from that standpoint, but so breadth and depth as far as the role goes, and just is really acclimated. We have a new staff, obviously, me being a new head coach, and it's been really, gratifying to me to see how, everybody's, the synergy we have within the group has been really good. So a lot of collaboration amongst our staff, and a credit to the guys on the staff, including Ron, that they're able to work together in such an efficient and positive way.
What led you away from the coordinator thing? And I ask that because Rick is doing the same this year. He had always done coordinators and not this year.
I think it's so different from team to team and coach to coach. I think it can work. That hasn't been the way that I've approached it.
Ever?
No, we've had, certain groups of people that I think can dig deeper into certain areas in certain games. We do that to a degree in player development. The challenge is at times people get siloed, and I think there's a balance there between being able to focus and develop an expertise in a given area, and then also collectively having communication within the group. I think as staffs have gotten larger, some of those dynamics become more of a managerial challenge, and what it does, it really just puts even more of a premium on having like a selfless staff, the way we talk about having a selfless team, it's not that we got me kind of waxing philosophical on this. It's not that we're not focused on certain things, in smaller groups, but as far as having, those coordinator positions, that definitively, I think basketball is different than, say, football in that regard.
Later on, Snyder did acknowledge that he hired Norred basically on the recommendation of Brad Stevens and Rick Carlisle. He also liked Norred as sort of his G League experience. And I thought it was a pretty interesting answer if you like to sort of go into the inner workings of teams and how coaches and staffs appreciate and sort of operate, because Snyder is, of course, a new coach, and this is basically an entirely new staff. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So there you go on that. We don't know much about what's going to happen the rest of this week. The Hawks the Hawks are coming home in between games. So they'll be practicing in Atlanta a couple times between now and Friday. And then Friday is the preseason finale up in Philadelphia. There was a report today that James Harden might play, which would be interesting. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, but we'll keep an eye on that one. It's not a Bally Sports Southeast game. And unlike the Pacers game today, it's not going to Philly's broadcast crew is actually an NBC station, so they cannot just run that feed. But if you are able to watch it, it's going to be on NBA TV. So this year, and sometimes in the last couple of years especially, there's been a game or two that the Hawks fans in Atlanta can't watch without League Pass or something weird. This year, not going to be the case. So NBA TV will have that one on Friday, and we'll have more podcast content between now and then. But we just wanted to give you the PSA there. And the Hawks open their season about 8 days from now, 9 days from now. It's going to be next Wednesday in Charlotte. I'll be in that one, and that'll be a lot of fun to dive into what transpires between the Hawks and the Hornets when the games actually matter and the lights come on for real. So all that said, thank you very much for listening to the podcast today, everybody. I really do appreciate it. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, and then, of course, on YouTube on the video side. Like, rate, review, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. And we'll see you all later on this week.